So, if you've just watched God Grew Tired of Us, you've been on this absolutely incredible journey with the Lost Boys of Sudan. You saw their strength, their pain, and that constant, burning hope for a safe place to call home. What we're going to do now is connect that really powerful, personal story to the bigger political picture of South Sudan, the birth of a nation that came from that very hope, and, well, the enormous challenges it's faced ever since.
You know, this quote from John Dahl, it just hits you, right? It really gets to the heart of the absolute despair of that civil war. For the people who lived it, this wasn't just some political conflict. It felt like the end of the world. It was a total collapse of society, what sociologists sometimes call anomie. And it was literally out of those ashes that the dream of a new, peaceful country, a place they could finally call home, was born.
The film does such an amazing job of showing that personal fight for survival. But it's so important to see that this was also a collective journey. That long walk the Lost Boys took, in a way, it was a symbolic march toward creating an independent South Sudan.
I mean, their story is just staggering to think about. Fleeing a war that raged for more than 20 years, these were kids, trekking thousands of miles, facing horrors we can't even imagine. But for them, just surviving in a refugee camp like Kakuma, that wasn't the end game. The real dream, the ultimate goal, was always about going back to a homeland that was finally at peace, a homeland they could actually help build.
And then, for this one incredible moment, that dream actually became a reality. The time right around South Sudan's independence, it was just filled with this unbelievable feeling of optimism and unity. After all those decades of struggle, hope was finally winning.
So how did it happen? This timeline here shows the actual political steps that turned all that hope into a brand new country. And the real game changer was that 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement. It didn't just stop the fighting, it set up a path for a vote on independence. And when that vote finally happened in 2011, the whole world was watching, as a new nation was literally willed into existence by its people.
And just look at that number, 98.83%. Let that sink in for a second. It's almost impossible to overstate how huge that is. This wasn't some 51-49 split. This was a roar. It was a nearly unanimous shout from the people of southern Sudan saying, "We want our own nation, free from the violence that has defined our entire lives." This right here, this was the absolute peak of that collective hope.
But then, so tragically, just 2 years after all those celebrations, that dream just completely fractured. That unity that felt so powerful started to crumble, and the world's newest nation was suddenly thrown right back into another horrific civil war. So, what on earth went so wrong? Let's get into it.
Okay, now it's really important to understand this part. The new war didn't start among the people. It started right at the very top, as a political power struggle. In December of 2013, the president, Salva Kiir, accused his own VP, Riek Machar, of trying to overthrow him. Machar said, "No way," denied it completely, but it was too late. The political battle lines were drawn, and both men started gathering their supporters.
And this is where we see a classic and just tragic sociological pattern unfold. The political fight between Kiir, who is Dinka, and Machar, who is Nuer, almost immediately got mapped onto those existing ethnic identities. I mean, this is a textbook case of how a power struggle at the top can light a match to old tensions, basically weaponizing ethnic identity and turning a political fight into a widespread, brutal conflict that ripped the new nation apart.
The fallout from this fractured dream was just catastrophic. The numbers we're about to see, they paint a really grim picture of the human cost of this new war.
An estimated 400,000 people were killed. Just take a moment with that number. 400,000 lives lost, not in the war to gain freedom, but in the war that came right after. For a country that was just born, it's an almost unthinkable price to pay.
And on top of those who were killed, more than 4 million people were forced to run for their lives. 4 million. To put that in perspective, that's roughly a third of the entire population. They became refugees all over again, or were displaced inside their own country, their lives completely uprooted by violence once more. The crisis got so bad that by 2017, an official famine was declared. And listen to this. This wasn't because of a drought or bad weather. United Nations officials said it was a man-made disaster. The warring sides were actively blocking food and aid from getting to starving people.
So, after all that, where does that leave South Sudan today? Well, the civil war officially ended back in 2020, but the path forward is incredibly fragile. The country is still wrestling with the massive challenge of trying to build a peace that will actually last.
So, on paper, there is a solution.
A peace agreement in 2020 officially ended the war and, get this, put the two main rivals, Kiir and Machar, back into a power-sharing government together. But actually making that deal work and building any kind of real trust, well, that's been a very slow, very difficult road.
And you can see just how fragile things are. While the big national war is over, armed violence between different communities is still a huge problem across the country. And on top of that, the nation's very first democratic elections have been delayed over and over again. They're now pushed all the way to late 2026, which leaves the country's whole future leadership in question. Which brings us to this final, really tough question. We've seen the long walk it took just to create a state on a map. We've also seen how fast that state can break apart along political and ethnic lines. The Lost Boys' journey was a search for a home. The ongoing challenge for South Sudan is figuring out how to build that home for everyone, how to create a shared idea of what it means to be South Sudanese that's stronger than all the divisions that have caused so much pain. So what does it really take to turn a country into a nation?